Hello everybody, Superfly90 here, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to play chess. So on the chessboard there are 64 squares and 2 colors, white and black. And the first rule that you should know is that white always goes first. It's not like a choice, but you can't say, okay, I'm going to let black go first this time. No, white always goes first. So a little bit of history about the game before we start. Chess originated in India when somebody asked... a king asked his trusted advisor to make a board game, and he did. And the king loved the board game, which is chess. And he told him he would give him any reward he asked for. So the advisor just chuckled and he said, "Oh, that's easy. All I want is for you to put 1 rice on one square, 2 rice on the next square, 4 rice on the other, and so on and so forth as we double the rice grains up." The king laughed, and he thought this was a super small reward, and he started doing the rice. After a week, the advisor came back, and he laughed, and when he saw the king still putting rice pieces on the board, the advisor was like, "Oh, that was just a joke. There's no amount of rice in the universe that contains that much chess, because exponential growth makes it almost close to infinite amount of rice." But anyway, that's enough of the math lesson. It was brought into Europe, where they modernized it and made it the way it was today, and now here we are. So, in each side there are 6 types of pieces: the pawns, the rooks, the knights, the bishops, the kings, and the queens. So all of them move in a certain type of way. So we're just gonna take all the pieces off the board here, and let's start with the pawn. So the pawn is the first rule about the pawn: it can never be on the first rank it's in. So it can never be on the first row it's in. So you see these numbers that I have here? So white always puts his pieces on the 1 and 2 numbers, and black always puts his pieces on the 8 and 7 numbers. So a pawn can never go on the 1 number. So because pawns can never go backwards, and all pawns start on the 2 rank. So let's say the pawn's here. Pawns are some of the hardest to get used to movements because they have a variety of different movements. But it's easy. But once you get used to it, it's real easy. So at the start of the game, a pawn can either move 2 squares forward or 1 square forward. So let's say we have a pawn over here. We can either move it to this square, which is 2 squares forward, or this square, which is 1 square forward. And let's say, I'll get into this later, but I'll get into this in more detail later, but pieces can capture other pieces. So let's say there's a bishop here, and a pawn can kill it. But pawns don't kill it. If there's a bishop here, a pawn kills it like this. A pawn kills diagonally. If a bishop's here, then a pawn can't just kill it. A pawn can't kill this kind of bishop, but it can kill diagonally. Okay, that's enough about the pawn, so I'll say goodbye to the pawn and the bishop. I'll move on to the coolest looking piece in my opinion, the knight. So the knight starts on these 2 squares. We'll get more to that later. So let's say it starts here. The knight is, besides the pawn, the only other piece that can move on your first turn. Meaning, knights can jump over other pieces. Let's say we have the bishop here, and there's a pawn here. The bishop can't just jump over the pawn and say, haha. Now, only the knight can do that. So even if there's 3 pawns blocking the knight can jump over all of them. So how the knight moves is in an L shape. And it can move in 2 different L shapes. So let's say the knight's here. It can move in this sort of L, like L. So you see here, this is kind of like an L. Oh, and you can also move it it might be an inverted L. It's an inverted L for you. It can move in it's all sorts of L, inverted, rotated, whatever, as long as it's an L. And not only can it move in this sort of L, it can also move in where there's 2 spaces forward and 1 to the side. It can move 1 space forward and 2 to the side, like here. So, also I forgot to mention this with the pawn, but at the most, the knight can move up to 8 squares. So in like this position, then I can move here, L, here, other L, here, 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 and here, which is 8 squares. Whereas the pawn, depending, can move like 4 squares, you can say at the most, because once at the starting square, you can go 1 square, 2 square, and if there happens to be an enemy piece on either place, 3 square or 4 square. Okay, well, that's enough about the knight. Let's talk about the bishop. So the bishops start here in the start of the game. And so let's say a bishop's here. Also repeat, a bishop can only, so like if a bishop starts on a white color in the start of the game, it can only go to other white colors. So how the bishop moves is diagonally. So like, as long as there's no pieces blocking her path, like this bishop, it can go like all the way over here. Because like I said before, bishops can't jump over pieces. So a bishop can go wherever it wants in like this position, but as long as there's a diagonal, so like it's diagonally facing this, so like so you can go here or here, 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 here. It can go a lot of places, and so if it's here, which I think is the place where it has the most squares it can go to, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It can go to an impressive 13 squares. Whereas like the knight can only go to a power of 8 squares. So next up on our list is the rook. So now the rooks start here and here. And it's kind of like similar to the bishop, except the other way around. While the bishop has the power to go diagonally, the rook has the power to go straight. So if the rook's here, let's say, you can move it like all here, 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 or here. It can't jump over pieces, only the knight can do that. It just go yee-haw. No, it can't. It can only. Well, it has. It can't like. It has to stop here, or it can capture that piece. But we'll get into that later. But for now, just think that a rook has to stop whenever he sees an enemy piece. But if there is no enemy pieces, then he can just go wherever he likes. Like he can go here, 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 here. So at its maximum, the rook can go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and impressive 14 squares. And now the queen is basically the boss of the game. So the queen is basically a rook and a bishop combined. And you can see where I'm going with this. The queen can go both straight and diagonally. Meaning it can go here, 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 here. But the other rules still apply, like the fact that it can't jump over a piece and it has to stop when it sees an enemy piece, which is basically the same thing. So yeah, and he can go like wherever it wants. And at its peak, the queen can go an impressive 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27 squares. 27 squares at its peak of like the highest amount of places you can go. And so the king is kind of like the thing that you need to protect in the game, so it's very, very important, but we'll get into that later on. So the king can only move to 8 squares at its peak. I say at its peak because at different places on the board, pieces can move different. Whereas like here, it can only move to 3 places. Here, it can only move to 8 places. But you're probably wondering, well, how does it move? So the king is similar to the queen, except for the fact that if the queen can move like anywhere, like that, the king can also do that, except only 1 space. So 1, 2, 3. So it can move. It has the qualities of a rook and bishop, except for the very sad downturn that it can only move 1 space. And also same rules apply. It can't jump over pieces and all that. Congratulations. Now we got how the pieces move. Let's move on to some other rules. So So how to win, you're like, well, this is all great and all, but how do we win the game? So I need to tell you about 3 things then. Checks, stalemates, and checkmates. Checks occur, and remember when I said, checks? Yeah, checkmate and stalemates, yeah. So, remember when I was talking about how the king is why you need to protect it? Yeah, we're going to get into that now. So let's say the king's over here, and an enemy piece is aiming towards it. Actually, I should go with everything first, So now we're going to move on to captures and how we can capture other pieces. So, like I said before, there are 2 colors on the chessboard, white and black. So, let's say this is the game right now. So, if it's white's turn, it can kill this white piece, because like I said before, pawns can kill diagonally, and they move straight, but they don't kill straight, or they don't move diagonally. So, a pawn can kill this, and this is out of the game forever, unless something else happens, which we'll get into later. But in order to get the pawn, this would be dead. So, in this position, and if it was black's turn, the bishop can take the pawn. And besides the pawn, all other pieces, when they move, they capture the same way. So, like, the knight captures in the L mill, and the L variation. The bishop captures in with the diagonals. The rook captures straight, and the queen captures diagonally and straight. The queen can just kill it and make it out of action. Yeah. So then, there's the king. The king cannot die in battle. That's the rule. If a king dies in battle, then that's very dishonorable, and it's not allowed in this game. The king cannot die in this game. Because whenever some piece, like let's say the queen, is looking at it under its line of fire, we can say, so the queen is looking at it like it wants to capture the next move, we cannot do anything except for save our king. And there's 3 ways we can do that. 1, we can run away with the king. We can go here. Yay. Be safe. 2, if there's a pawn happen to be sitting here, we can block it. We can protect our king so that it's not under its line of fire. This is. Or 3, if the pawn happen to be here, we can kill the piece that's attacking and checking the white king. Or the black king. So, how do we win the game? Well, let's say we have a position and since king's hand, I'll put a black king here too. We have a position like this, where the king cannot go anywhere. There's no pieces to help it. There's no pieces to block it or capture pieces. The king's helpless. Then we have to surrender. Check. A nice way of doing that is tipping our king over to signify that you've won, good job, we've lost. So the king, we officially lose the game, and that is known as checkmate. If the king's in check and he cannot run away, block, or capture the piece that's checking. Anyway, so yeah, and then we come to the point of stalemate. Stalemate. Let me just create a stalemate position. Yeah, there we go. So let's say white is playing here. And white cannot do anything, or else it will be in check. And remember, you cannot put yourself in check, because then the opponent can take it, and a king cannot die in battle. So you cannot surrender your own king. So you have no legal moves in the game. We call moves that you're allowed to do legal moves and moves that you aren't allowed to do illegal moves. So there's no legal moves, meaning it's stalemate and the game is a tie. So there's 3 scenarios for how a game could end. Either it's a win, it's a loss, and it's a tie. So a win happens if you manage to successfully checkmate the other person. a loss happens if you manage to successfully get checkmated, which is a very successful whatever. And a draw can happen in a few scenarios. One, like I showed you, is stalemate, where the king cannot do anything, it's a draw. Then there's something known as a 50-move rule. And so if there's 50 moves that go by without the move of a pawn or a capture of a piece, then it's declared a draw. So let's say there's something like here. Imagine if you just go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you just do 50 moves. If you manage to pass 50 moves in that time, the game's a draw. Done. But it has to be without the move of a pawn. So let's say there's a pawn here. Then let's say we're at 49, and then the entire thing resets. Or if this captures here, then it's also a draw. Another way to lose and draw is if you're in a match and you know you're going to lose, there's no point in continuing, you can just give up. It's not considered giving up, it's considered like get adequate to when you know a game's out of reach, not to just annoy your opponent by trudging along, but it'll say, I quit, you win, get dropped. And that is known as resigning. And a polite way to do that is by lightly flicking your king over to show that you give up. And in a draw, let's say if one guy, let's say, I'll give you a 50 move example. So let's say there's a 50 move thing going on. Both sides are just parading around with the queens. And one guy is like getting annoyed. So like, look, okay, we both know nobody's going to win this. Why don't we just call it a draw? And if the other guy accepts, then it's a draw. If the other guy doesn't accept, it keeps going until either one side prevails or it actually does manage to be a draw using specific rules. And another way to have a draw is known as threefold repetition. So sometimes waiting for 50 moves can take forever. So let's say we are here. So it's black to move. So black goes here. So then white goes here, black goes here, white goes here, black goes here, white goes here. And chess players will get very annoyed. I mean, anybody would get very annoyed to having to play this for 50 moves. So if there's a move called threefold repetition. So if something repeats, so a move is considered when white and black makes a turn, that's what's considered a move. So the 50 move rule also applies. So that technically the 50 move rule applies to 100 turns. So the 100 turn rule, you can say. But it's more generally accepted to be known as the 50 move rule. This is threefold repetition, or you can say the 3 move rule. If the exact same thing happens in 3 moves, so one move. So if it's white, let's say. So if it's black turn, one move. Then one move this happens, 2 move. If this position arises twice, and then arises for the 3rd time, that it's automatically a draw. Yeah, I think that's all the ways you can draw it. So, what else? We went through the pieces and how they move, how you can win, lose, or draw, and how checkmates and stalemates work. So there's a few special rules, but before we get into that, I'm gonna teach you how to set up the board in the start of the game. So you may have noticed at the start of the video, and I explained it a little during the pieces move, how to piece and move segment, and how that this is set up in a specific way, and it is. It may seem very confusing at first, but as time goes on, you'll be able to memorize it at base. So, like I said before, all the pawns go on this rank, and there's 8 pawns in a set. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So So all of these pawns go on here. Next, so now we put the king and the queen in the middle, and we put them like this. And a nice trick to remember where to put the king and the queen is that the queen always goes on its color square. So like this is the white queen and this is a white square. The queen goes on that square. And if we have a black queen, it will always go on the black square. So the king and queen, and the king will always go on the square that's like adjacent to it in the middle. So the king and queen are flanked by the bishops, who are guarding the king and queen. And then the knights flank them. And the rooks flank them. And that is how you set up the chessboard. And we'll just do the same thing with black. It will be a good review. So pawns on knight on the second square. Pawn here, rook on the edge, queen on its color, king right next to it in the center, pawn, more pawns, bishop, rook, knight, two more pawns, oops, and bishop that for some reason went over to the white side. So, there's three special rules in chess. One is castling. So let's say you have an ongoing game. So it's something like this. Something like this is happening. So now you see the king and the rook. And you shouldn't keep the king in the center because it's apparently prone to attacks. So chess creators decided that there should be a rule to move this into safety. And apparently there is. And when I said the king moved, there is one exception. The king can move two squares like this, and the rook move two squares like that. And that's what's known as castling. It's perfectly legal. You just go like this. And yeah, it's that simple. Here, two pieces here, three pieces here. You can also do castling the other way. So let's say completely different sort of game happens. This is just an example of a game. What might happen. And you notice black can castle right here if he wants to, but he doesn't always have to. Sometimes it's not necessary to castle. And now, white can castle queenside. So this way, the king moves two squares, and the rook moves three squares to flank its king. It's not entirely protected, as it was over here, but it's still pretty protected from attacks, and a lot of chess players tend to go here later on. Try to just move the pieces here in two moves to ensure protection from the king, because, like I said, if your king isn't protected enough, you get checkmated and you lose the game. Wah, wah, wah. And the second special rule is a bit more complicated. So I guess chess people, the person who made chess, decided that pawns were a bit too weak. I mean, they couldn't really do too much. So let's say it's like, I'll just make some scenario. He takes here. Just make some random scenario. Here, 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 and here. So then here is a pawn, and if a pawn can, along with its back rank, can't go to the opposing player's back rank. So meaning this pawn can't go to here, while being a pawn. So if black decides to go here, or rather take the rook like that, it could turn into any piece it wants, except for a pawn or a king. Meaning this can turn into a queen, a rook, a knight, or a bishop. So let's say, he decides to turn into a queen. So you don't take the queen from over here and put it over here. No, you take like maybe some chess players tend to go with the upside down rook for a queen, or even to just find the extra queen lying around. I have one right over here. Let me just get it. Extra queen, and just place it down here. So the third special rule in chess is something known as en passant, and it's one of the more advanced rules. Even experienced players seem to forget it. So let's set the position back to its original position. Yeah, en passant's one of on the more complicated side. I know I said that before and you're getting annoyed, but trust me, it sort of is. So pay attention. I dropped my pawn over there. Whoops. Yep. So en passant, let me just start a game scenario. So this will work for white and black. So let's say, okay, that's my game scenario. So let's say the guy goes here. So then we have a few options. We can just do our regular moves. But if we want to take that pawn, we can't though, right? It's not allowed. It's these two pawns are it's not allowed. So because you can only take diagonally, right? Apparently, so what chess players thought is that like in the end game, after you successfully manage to kill this pawn, another one just comes right at you, and they thought it wasn't fair. So they decided to find a way to kill this pawn with a pawn that's adjacent to it. And you go here, this pawn's dead. I know it may seem confusing, but that's the rule that they made. Don't ask me, I didn't invent it. I'm just here to teach you guys how to play. So, like, more advanced stuff in this rule. So it can only happen if the pawn moved 2 squares on his first turn. So, like, let's say, even it works for black piece too. So let's say black has a pawn here, and he just takes that. And yeah, so what's the other side? Yeah, it can only happen once. So let's say you just go, this is the position, and for whatever reason you decide to go here, and then you go here. You can't do it right after. You can only do it on the turn that it's played. And yeah, that's basically it. So I hope I hope you all learn how to play chess using this tutorial. Oh, please feel free to share what you thought in the comment section below if YouTube allows that, because sometimes YouTube doesn't. Whatever. But be sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you. Bye.